dedicate a brief chapter to the concept of king opposition, which is an idea that appears in many king and pawn endgames, and in fact is a common way to get a win, even in a situation like this where both sides have just one pawn. So, the idea of king opposition is related to that we saw on the first video of the rook and king checkmate against an only king, where two kings facing each other with one square in between really stop its opponent from accessing the squares in between. So if we play a move like this, we are taking control of these squares, and now the black king cannot access them. But more important than that is the fact that after the black king makes a move, then they will open a path for our own king to advance. So if they play like this, we can simply come and take this pawn. If they insist on staying on defense, we just maneuver around the king and we keep pushing it away. Thanks to zugzwang again here, the black king would love to stay on this defensive square, but he has no choice but to open up the path for ours until we eventually take the pawn. Notice that if we go back here at the beginning and play this move instead, now it's black who can take the opposition. And now we cannot really access these squares on the 6th rank. And if black wants to defend, all he has to do is just imitating our moves, never leaving the king opposition, and we just have no way to pass. If we come here trying to maneuver around, then we are basically opening the path ourselves. Here we have a slightly more complicated endgame that we will explore. So, of course, we don't want to play a move like this, or of course, this would be similar. And going with king f4, not taking the opposition, would allow black to make a choice. They can either simply draw the game easily, like this, just by chasing our king around and not letting us cross into the next rank, or they could even make the choice to start a sort of pawn race. So we go capture this pawn, and black goes capture that pawn, and I let you calculate as an exercise what's going to happen here. Is this a good idea, or would it be better to simply stop our king from coming there and keeping the pawn out of danger and just making a simple draw? So take your time to think that position, and now going back to the main move, which is taking the opposition. Now we put black in a really tough spot because no matter where they go, they are leaving us a clear path towards the enemy pawns. So they could go here or here. Let's take this move as an example, and you can analyze the other one and see that it's actually very similar. And here, I'll let you think for a while, how would you continue? Okay, so we shouldn't rush, because if we come here to take this pawn, then black has also the option of going for our own pawn, and we are arriving at a position where we won't actually win. I let you calculate the endgame, but if black plays precisely, both sides end up with a new queen. So what we should do is still maintaining the opposition. And now black is in a really bad situation, because if they try to go for this pawn by playing king e6, we simply arrive much earlier than before. They've basically wasted two moves in the pawn race because they had to go with the king forth and then back. So as you can see, this position is easily winnable by white, because, well, the pawn advances much faster. So this means that black shouldn't really go for that race. So if one side takes one pawn, the other takes the other, and we try to arrive earlier than the opponent. They should stay on the defense. But as we saw in the previous example, this doesn't really work, because again there's a bunch of zugzwang, and white eventually captures the pawn. Of course, These situations are actually complicated, but I don't really want to drill down into the theory of king and pawn endgames. I just want to show you a few basic examples of some key ideas. So we're going to stick to just this, but feel free to analyze all the positions we saw in extra detail. Let's see now how we can use king opposition not just to capture enemy pawns, but also to clear the path for our own pawns. So in this situation, if we bring our king here and we let our opponent take king opposition, we don't really have a way through. So black can just stay like this. Our only option is going with the pawn first, but you can explore it and we'll learn it in a future course. This position would be a draw. Not a trivial draw, but any competent player will be able to find it or most likely know it already. But how can white win easily in this position? White can just take a king opposition like this to force black out of the way. So it doesn't matter which side they go. Let's say they go here, but the other option is the same. And now we keep opening a path for our pawn to advance, supported by the king. So let's say black tries to stay on defense. Of course, this would be also simple. We can now just take all the path. Now you see that the white king controls all the squares that the pawn will need to go through. So the pawn will promote. There's no way to stop it. So let's go back a few moves and say the king stays trying to block. But again, we play the same thing, king opposition, and now we take another square and we just promote. We keep pushing the pawn until the end now. Okay, so this is gonna be it for the topic of king opposition. It can get really complicated, but we will explore other things. There will be some exercises that relate to king opposition too. And in the next chapter, we will cover the topic of king activity that we've sort of discussed in this concept of king and pawn endgame. So it's one king fighting the other and looking for zugzwangs and things like that. But we will also explore how we can use an active king to get an advantage over an opponent who has a passive king.